Welcome back. We've been reporting all morning a shocking rebuke of President Biden. It really is, as the Republicans win the governorship in Virginia and the governor's race in New Jersey is, when we say dead heat, we mean dead heat, folks. Joining me now, all winners here. Love to have these ladies at the table. Candace Kelley, Ameshia Cross, and Brittney Cooper. We're going to start with you, Brittney. I guess we shouldn't sugarcoat it, right? I mean, it did not go well for a lot of blue last night. New Jersey, though, too close to call. Youngkin is the winner in Virginia. A stunningly bad night for President Biden and the Democrats. Can you shape the narrative here and not the spin that they're going to shovel to us today?
Look, I think that people are going to talk about what the Democrats need to be doing, but I think that as a community, we should be talking about the way that white supremacy was on the ballot. And the way that this is an attempt to try to this is what we've dealt with as we've been battered this year by a stunning disinformation campaign that has muddied the issue, has made it about the problem of critical race theory, which none of these people, when you talk to them, can even explain what it is. And so while I think that the Biden administration has to get some big wins on the table in order to energize people for 2022. I actually think that that's a bit of a premature discussion, because what feels more true to me is that those obstructionists on the Democratic side, namely Sinema and Manchin, created a context in which Biden went into the election yesterday with no wins no huge wins. And now they're going to spin it and say that they have a mandate to govern in a more centrist way, when really what's true is that they created the context for people not to be motivated because the Democrats looked like they couldn't get anything done. And that's about obstructionism. And so before we start talking about, and here's the implication of that. If we don't tell the truth about it, then what's going to happen is that the Democrats are going to make the same faulty mistake they make every time, which is that they're going to govern in a moderate way rather than being bolder. And bolder is what we need right now.
And I'll follow up with that. Ameshia, isn't moderate, governing in a moderate way, code for black people aren't going to get what black people deserve and have been promised?
Ding, ding, ding. You hit it right there on the head, Sharon. I wish I had a gift to give you, some type of prize.
I do too.
What we find
here,
white Democrats say moderate, it literally means I'm going to say what I need to say to get black voters out. But when the time comes, when push comes to shove, I'm going to pull back, because I know that if I do these things for black people, that means I'm going to lose my prized white voters, my prized voters who are your everyday workers. What we saw, and to a point that I heard a moment ago, I'll add, what we saw in Virginia yesterday was a 15-point break from what happened in Virginia with Republicans in 2020. 15 percentage points higher in terms of white women, particularly jumping out and voting Republican, largely amongst white, non-college educated women. But with that being said, what the Republicans have done and what they have always done is basically create a fervent ground and fertile soil for white supremacy to thrive and survive. Education has always been on the ballot. But when you talk about it and coax it in critical race theory, when you coax it in racism, when you're talking about people who largely ran to the suburbs to get away from black people anyway, and that's your target audience, who now feel as though their lives have turned around and that things are beginning to look different. The place is getting blacker, the place is getting browner, and you weaponize that against them. All of a sudden, now that is a rallying cry. Democrats fell on their face in Virginia yesterday, particularly because they did not have an answer to it. They did not have an answer to it and don't want to point to the fact that racism is still alive and well in America, and that just because there was a massive George Floyd protest last year across the country and across the globe did not change that. White people will always white. And with that being said, we will continually see this push and this drive to appeal to their lesser selves, which is racism.
Yeah, and Candace, things for both parties have looked bleak, right? At certain times in our history, it just is what it is. But this morning feels different. I want you to weigh in on that, but I also want to zero in on white women. Why aren't white women given more credit? A couple of segments ago, I excused some of this, and it's just from where I sit, from my view as a black woman, as, they just like that USA Today headline, critical race theory, critical race theory. Why don't we give them credit for exactly what they are doing here? Don't they know what's going on here? And don't they prefer that man in the fleece over some policies that benefit us?
Oh, absolutely. They have galvanized over the course of history in order to get their voices heard. And you're right, they are not a group that we particularly pay attention to, but we certainly are now. We certainly are lately, especially when it comes to critical race theory and education. Listen, when we look at the statistics, Sharon, and we break it down, it was more important than the coronavirus. It was more important than economics. Critical race theory, education, they're saying, is this umbrella. And I think that also what helped, Sharon, was this whole idea that President Trump is not on Twitter. He did not have the opportunity to kind of sway one way or the other these people who were out there to think one way or the other. He was out of the reins in terms of his mouthpiece, and this actually helped the governor win in Virginia. He did not want to align himself with Trump, and Trump did not have a mouthpiece in order to energize the base. So the fact that he was off of Twitter, it has been a good thing, but it actually was an even better thing for this win in Virginia.
Yeah.
And I think and this was a really big deal, something that I think people should be talking about more. He's off, and that means a lot.
Yeah, it does. It's like that cake and eat it too thing, isn't it, Brittney? But let's go over some of the winners from last night. There were some winners of color. Michelle Wu became the first person of color to become the mayor of Boston. And I mean, I really wanted to is that right? And push back on the producer, say that can't be. We're talking about Boston, right? With that lobster and stuff up there. Boston has not a white man as a mayor?
Yeah. No, I mean,
Brittney,
look,
you first.
I think, I think that is a win for Boston. And, and you had, two women of color who were front runners in Boston after coming off of having a black woman as the interim mayor. And so that's a big deal. One of the things that we are seeing in terms of mayoral races across the country is that they do tend to be a local bellwether for more progressive politics. And I think we have to remember that part of the Democratic strategy going forward really does have to be building a pipeline for leadership that can move onto the national stage. And so that means diversifying what progressive policymaking looks like at the local level, particularly in big urban areas, right? I'm also interested in the Atlanta race, right? I'm also interested in the Minneapolis race. So, there are some places that we have to look to see how local policy is going to take up these broader progressive issues. But Boston is a thing that I think we can put in the win column. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. But Ameshia, when you talk about that next star in the Democratic Party, which you would think that, given the age and the tenure on the national stage of our current president, that we would have had the next in line, several in line, and they would be diverse people. Who is that person? Because we've run into this before where the party has just said, Hillary, it's your turn. And it doesn't always work out that way.
Absolutely. The Democratic Party has a long history of coronating people ahead of time. The people that get coronated, such as Hillary Clinton, are typically not people who look like anybody on this panel. People of color, specifically blacks and black women, have a very hard trudge to victory when it comes to national politics. And I think that for the Democratic Party, what they've allowed to happen with Fox News and other conservative outlets basically hammering Kamala Harris every single chance that they get has made it extremely hard for them to carve out, or even for other mainstream media sources to talk about her successes, because they're pointedly about her failures almost every single day. And many of these things are created in the minds of white supremacists. They're not failures in general. But I think that with that being said, it only makes it harder for the next person of color in that national spot. What Republicans have done very well is diminish the strengths and abilities of minority groups. And I think that the more they use that bullhorn to do it, the harder it is, because the DNC, the Democratic Party in general, has yet to create a formidable plan to push against those types of notions. So this pipeline becomes extremely difficult because they still believe in this red, white, blue coalition of greatness that's all going to come together and sing kumbaya around each other based on shared values, which Americans don't have. Many people have their own and are driven by their own personal interests. We're seeing that on a daily basis. They need to be able to tune into what those things are and elevate minorities who are actually running at the local level. I agree. We have such great local talent that is extremely diverse across many states in this country. Get those people prepped, primed, and ready, instead of always telling them to wait. always telling them that, you know, America has not gotten to the point where somebody who looks like you or somebody who has your ideas is going to be successful at a national level. We've seen Republicans run a whole bunch of people nobody in America had ever heard of before. Yet Democrats have a very hard time elevating individuals who even have great successes locally. And that, I think, is one of the most frustrating things.
Sharon, can I jump
It is
in and just say 2 words?
Yeah, you can, Candace. Yes.
Eric Adams. When you ask about a superstar, we're talking Eric Adams. I mean, we've been talking Eric Adams. Maybe this is just an East Coast thing, but we know that this is a guy who knows the trenches. He's been behind bars. He's been a police officer. He grew up poor. He's had dyslexia. He knows what it means to kind of be in the trenches. And when you ask who that next superstar is, who they are grooming to go up for that comeuppance, it's going to be Eric Adams. And it's not officially declared, but we know that most of the votes are in. He is going to be the next mayor of New York City, and that's a big deal. And that's where he's going to go, just only up. He's really had impeccable means in terms of bringing the community together.
And he has a commanding presence. He does. And he doesn't necessarily fit completely into a box. And I think you're exactly right. And I would say this, I wonder when Black people are going to say, you know what? You've taken me for granted for too long, Democratic Party, and we'll do our own thing. Whatever it is, this isn't working. And even though Ameshia was talking about how the Republican Party has successfully talked about failure after failure and painted Kamala Harris and others with this broad brush of loserville, if that's a word, don't you think that Democrats have to own this? I'm a little tired, Brittney, of this president wrapping his arm around all shucks Joe, the other Joe in West Virginia, and saying it's going to be okay, when what I saw on the ballot last night is Manchin and Sinema have no incentive. What you talked about. I mean, it's almost like they were just sitting back waiting like, well, we can't do it now, so, you know, I just, when are we going to just say, you're not going to do this to me?
Yeah, look, I'm not here for the white Democratic tears that we're going to experience all over the media today, this sort of white Democratic grief, because that grief is about the fact that white liberals are being faced with the reality that their white counterparts on the Republican side are fully, fully committed to a white supremacist project, and there is no bringing them back. And instead of responding to that in the proper way, we don't need to keep talking about how to win those voters back. We don't need to keep talking about how to win white women back. To Ameshia's point, to Candace's point, we got to figure out how to galvanize young voters, how to galvanize voters of color. You know, Black voter turnout was down slightly in Virginia, and we're in a moment where everything is so critical that you've got to have historic levels of voter turnout in every election, and that means that you've got to get Black people to the polls. And while I do think that Biden actually did a really great job in terms of his governance of COVID, what becomes clear is that if the Republicans are using massive racial appeals to bring their people to the polls, what would happen if Democrats said, you know what? We are not going to be the party of racism. And they said it explicitly. The other party is the party of racism. We are done with them. We are going to govern boldly because we don't want to go into into the kind of past that they're trying to bring back for our American future, right? What would happen if the Democrats became explicit? But the reason they can't get past it is because many of these white liberals, they sit around the Thanksgiving table with these Republican folks and they see their humanity and they see their anxiety and they want to excuse it. And because they do that, right, they can't think about the fact that the future of the Democratic Party looks far more like the women on this panel and our younger counterparts than it looks like the people who are the political strategists talking about what needs to happen.
That base has to be energized.
You're exactly right. We're going to leave it there, ladies, and I'm going to button it this way. When you continue to pander to that old guard who, yes, historically racist, you're turning your back on me. You're turning your back on us, and that's got to be acknowledged. Ladies, as always, thank you.